be a screw, feel my own adrenaline. Yeah, I do just what I do, and I hope you let me in, yeah.
Hello and welcome back, fellow anime lovers, to Cypherfics. I am delighted to have you join us once again in the world of fanfiction and fantasy. This is the 5th part of What If Issei, Rias Find Harry Potter. Special note, this fanfic is written in a masterpiece of Gabriel Herrol on FANFICTIONnet. Do check and support the author too. Now smash the like, share and subscribe button for more. Also press the bell icon so that you never miss such great parts. Thanks for the introduction. Now let's dive into the world. After looking around the magical shopping district until supper time, it was a satisfied group of 7 friends who trekked back to their hotel. After a satisfying supper where everyone took at least 2 helpings, they were still growing. Each went to his own room. During the trek from the dining room to the rooms, Kiba asked Issei, "Hey Issei-kun, could you do me a little favor?" Intrigued, the Red Dragon Emperor answered positively. "Sure, why not? What do you need, man?" The blonde-haired boy then said with an amused smirk on his lips, "If you feel the need to masturbate tonight, could you please do it in the bathroom and lock the door before closing it behind you? I really don't want to see or hear you play with yourself in the bed next to mine." Issei's reaction was immediate. The brown-haired boy started to bluster and splutter incomprehensibly while his face was turning into a red puce color. Why Kiba had decided to bring that subject up? The others' reactions were quite varied. Asia, very embarrassed and somewhat turned on, had her face turned a bright shade of red and her head was now full of lewd scenarios. Akino was giggling while smiling a bit lecherously. Rias was also giggling and smiling, more amused than anything else. Kaneko was as stoic as usual, except a small amused smile that was now on her lips. Harry, in his case, was guffawing loudly, holding his stomach and tears of mirth were spilling from his green eyes. That was a good one. Once the mirth had gone down, everybody retired to their rooms, but not before a still beat red Asia took her courage in both hands before putting a steamy kiss on Issei's lips and murmured at his ear, "Think of me if you play with yourself tonight, will you? If you play nice this weekend, maybe we can explore a bit more when we get back home." Then she raced inside the girl's room without waiting for his answer, her long blonde hair following in her wake. While the boys entered their rooms, just as the door was closing, they heard Kiba say, "So, do you want to go take care of your business right now, or can I go take a shower first? I'm just glad that we can't order movies right now. I'm not in the mood for porn." Issei's splutters were heard, and just as the door was about to shut since Kiba's comment had took his mind out of the gutter it was in, they also heard him say out loud, "Shut up, you damn pretty boy." In their room, Akino and Harry snickered after hearing that. It seems that even Kiba was having his fun at Issei's expense these days. Honestly, the Priestess of Thunder was glad to see Asia coming out of her shell like that. The timid former nun had made her claim known on the brown-haired male teen, and Akino really thought that those two were great together. The boy was still rambling about his goal to become a harem king, but in her humble opinion, it was only because he hadn't realized that he already had found something better than his original goal. Maybe somebody else would one day come along and attach itself to their couple, but nothing was written in stone yet. She was stirred out of her thoughts by hearing their door close and lock itself by magic, and then by her now very amorous boyfriend who was starting to rain a plethora of small kisses on her neck. Then one of his hands started making headway under the long skirt she chose to wear today to caress her right thigh, while his other one was starting to undo the button of her blouse, revealing her cleavage and black lacy bra much to his viewing pleasure. From there, Akino took an active role into getting undressed, helping her man to remove piece after piece until she was entirely naked as the day she was born. With a predator-like smirk and a look of lust in her violet eyes, she stalked toward her mesmerized paramour and started to get him out of his clothes in preparation for the coming main event. She adored the effect she had on him. She got rid of his loved leather jacket. She had learned that it really was a dragon hide jacket, highly magically resistant and not half bad for the physical resistance to boot. Then after she got rid of his black AC/DC t-shirt, she took the time to admire his muscled torso. He was tall, taller than her even, quite yummy, and had somewhat of a swimmer shape with strong, defined and broad shoulders. There were a few faded scars here and here on his torso and shoulders, proving that as a hybrid being, he had not inherited the Phoenix clan's immortality and/or their instant regeneration. She caressed them with her fingers, wondering what stories they were hiding. She would question him another time about those though. She was not in the mood for storytelling tonight. Pressing her now naked breasts against his also naked and muscled torso seemingly broke Harry out of his torpor, since now his hands and lips were everywhere on her at once. More than one time she let out moans of pleasure and bliss due to his gropes and kisses. Soon enough her man had kicked away his shoes, socks and pants, but before getting rid of his boxers, the last cloth-made barrier between them, Harry remembered to cast the upgraded silencing spells on every walls, the front door, the floor and the ceiling. When he was sure that nobody would hear them going at it, not that he was very shy, but he wasn't in the mood to deal with complaints that could ruin their glorious morning after. After getting rid of his underwear, he was also bare as the day he was born. Soon they were together again, just like the night before. Of course after their foreplay, but before the main dish so to speak, Harry took a little time off to put on some protection. His father had made sure to really drill that lesson into his head when he first entered puberty. Safety first and foremost. The possible consequences outbalanced vastly the minor irritation of not jumping into the sack immediately without protection. After all, you never knew what could happen if you weren't careful. Once that little setback was passed, they did get to enjoy all the pleasures of the flesh had to offer. That session was way less painful and awkward than their first, what without her hymen in the way. They experimented on various positions, trying and discovering new things about themselves. While Akino frankly admitted to be into the BDSM and demonstrated that she wouldn't submit to him without a fight, her lover proved his mettle though by forcing her to submit to him and also making her declaring very salacious things out loud that she would never dare repeat were she not in the throes of passion. But since she was getting closer and closer to the edge, her sense of propriety was not responding. She was then ready to do anything, to say everything to finally fall over the edge, to obtain her so desired release. If it meant shouting out loud absolutely filthy things that she would never say outside of the bedroom, then so be it. Their night continued on this note, rotating the positions and the role of who was the master. After what seemed to be many hours later, they were finally sated and fell into an exhausted sleep cuddled together, sweaty, sticky, but with a contented smile still on their lips. It was great. Akino could definitely say that she loved having sex now. The next morning, after a good long shower and a quick romp into said shower, the couple went down to breakfast, being the last to arrive. It was there that Harry learned that Issei was an early riser since he was fully functional and ready for the day. To the contrary of Kiba, who was clutching his cup of black coffee in his hands like a lifeline. Rias was not as awake and active as her pawn, but way more than her knight, and the others were more or less awake also. After a round of good mornings and serving themselves from the breakfast buffet before finding them a table, they all took their time to eat. Seeing that both Harry and Akino were both eating very full plates, Rias decided to tease them a bit with an impish smile. "Well, well, it seems someone has been rather busy last night. You must have been very active to be that hungry this morning. Care to share some details?" Akino was a bit flummoxed to be on the receiving end of the teasing, since usually she was the one doing it, but said nothing. In Harry's case, he didn't react much outside of shrugging his shoulders for an answer. He was used to way worse teasing than that. If Rias wanted to garner a reaction out of him, she would have to do much better than that. He had a pretty thick skin by now. You really had to develop one when you're living in a chaotic household like the one he was raised in. He swore that half the time Sirius was still almost as young mentally as his sisters were right now. Remus was the struggling voice of reason, and his dad, while more grown up than before, was still prompt to fall back into his teenage years' behavior. Half the time his mom had to really put her foot down to stop all the horsing around, since Sirius and his father's antics was encouraging his younger sisters to do the same. So yeah, a little teasing like that was nothing new for him. Putting his attention on Kiba, Harry remarked that the Bishonen-looking boy was now more awake and functioning than before his 5 cups of strong black coffee. Maybe he could use the knight's less than prepared state of mind next time for a little experiment. After all, he knew so little about how devils reacted to compulsions. Does reincarnated devils were more susceptible to mind magic than the pure bloods when not prepared beforehand? It was food for thought. After a good fulfilling breakfast, the group went out to explore some more of the sights of the magical district. It was very relaxing to get away from it all for a short time. Here they didn't have the responsibilities of their schooling and/or their devil duties. They could be just themselves and enjoy their free time. They knew that they had to make the most of this little getaway, since Circeches, or more likely Graphia since the former had such a busy schedule, would soon come in the clubroom guns blazing and demand answers as to how the wards had fallen and why they hadn't contacted the guys in charge to report it like responsible individuals. That afternoon, after another good meal, they decided to leave the magical district to go wander in the regular part of the city. It was less magical, true, but no less entertaining. They did make a few pit stops here and here, like to an arcade where Rias creamed everybody present at Dance Dance Revolution. In Harry's case, it wasn't very hard to beat him. He didn't have much experience with video games, having only played a few and not that often. Unshielded electronics and uncontrolled magic often emitted by underage magical children doesn't mix very well, and his parents didn't believe that their kids should waste hours indoors glued in front of the TV when the weather was nice outside. His mom nearly changed her tune when she caught Sirius and him practicing Wronski feints. The Wronski feint, also known as the Wronski defensive feint, was a tactic in Quidditch where a seeker pretended to spot the golden snitch far below and raced to catch it, hoping the opposing seeker would copy. At the last second before reaching the ground, the fainting seeker pulled out of a dive, usually causing the opposing seeker to crash. In the backyard, though. The only one who was able to give the Gremory heiress a proper challenge in the game was surprisingly Issei. Harry and Aquino had a few silent laughs at seeing the normally composed young woman act her age and take offense when Issei accused her in jest. "You cheated, Buchu? There's no other way. The way you were moving is totally impossible. You had to have used a cheat code or something." Of course, Rias was quick to defend herself from such a dastardly accusation. She crossed her arms under her ample bosom, narrowed her blue-green eyes, giving her a dangerous look, and said to him with irritation clear in her voice, "I didn't cheat. I'm just better at the game than you. You're just a sore loser. Admit it and stop complaining." Issei was not quite ready to quit though, and launched back into a tirade, and Rias was ready to match him word for word. Of course, it was only some friendly banter though. Their words lacked any heat, and there was also a distinct lack of insults. After a good time at the arcade, they took off once again, with no real destination in mind. This time, after a slow walk of an hour and a half, they stumbled upon a cinema and decided to go watch a movie. Of course, the girls wanted to go watch a romantic comedy, aka a chick flick, much to the dismay of the boys, who would have much preferred an action-packed movie or something else, anything but a chick flick. Being rather smart and not at all beholden to Ria's authority, Harry decided to cut his losses early while Issei was trying in vain to convince the girls to his point of view, and left to go watch another movie in another room before Aquino could convince him Reed withhold sex until he folded to her point of view. Thank the Norns that she hadn't realized that she could do that yet, to go watch the chick flick with them. Apparently, the girls had all collectively decided to go watch Twilight. Kiba was fast enough to escape the girls at the last second, but Issei's luck had turned against him and he was roped into following the girls, much to his chagrin. Kiba and Harry then decided on something light and funny, since the more action-oriented movies would only play much later in the evening, so they bought a ticket each for Kung Fu Panda. They had some time to kill before the movie started, so they went to buy themselves some stuff to drink and eat for during the movie. The good thing when seeing movies like that when you were a supernatural being in disguise was the fact that some scenes could inspire you to reverse engineer the interesting stuff that you just saw to then tweak them to make said stuff work for your combat style. While this movie might have been intended for a younger audience, it didn't mean that you couldn't try your hand at the thing showed when you will have the time for it. In his case, Harry would definitely try to add some kung fu moves into his physical fighting style. Once both boys were out of the viewing room when their movie was over, they had to wait a bit for the girls and Issei since their movie was longer than the one Kiba and he had just seen. After about 20 minutes of waiting and a toilet break each, they had went one at the time in case the others would came out earlier than expected. Poor Issei and the girls finally came out once their movie was over. Strangely, it was Rias who started to read them the riot act once she saw them waiting for them. Near the door leading into the room, the girls and Issei had only just exited through. With her hands on her shapely hips and an authoritarian tone of voice, she then laid into them once she was near enough. Why did the both of you decided to ditch us like that? We had previously come to an agreement to always stay in group to not get lost in the city since it's so big around here. It was very irresponsible of you two to act like that. We had decided what movie we would watch. You shouldn't have left us, at least without telling us first. Frankly, I'm very disappointed in you two, and believe me, there will be consequences for both of you once we are back home. As it is, I'm seriously considering sending you both back home right away. So, what do you have to say for your defense? She finished with a very cross tone of voice, and with her arms now crossed under her bosom having for effect to push them upward, while tapping a foot in clear irritation. Such a phenomenon had Issei, in a very responsible amount of foresight, forcefully pinching his nose to stave off the nosebleed he knew was coming and averted his eyes from the beautiful sight. He was a pervert, maybe even the pervert, but he didn't want to be forced to pay for collateral damages to the cinema should his blood spray everywhere around him. He didn't possess the monetary means to reimburse things like that. The rest of the peerage members' reactions about the situation were quite varied. Asia pouted rather cutely, having wanted to watch a movie with all of her new friends present. Kaneko didn't really care one way or another. While she appreciated Kiba and was on good terms with him, she didn't really like Potter and his juvenile pranks he played on her and the rest of the school population. Akino was of mixed feelings about it. She was a bit miffed to not have been able to cuddle with her boyfriend during the movie, but she could understand that he had different tastes than them. Issei would have likely complained about being deprived of male company to help him suffer through that movie, but he was still otherwise occupied at pinching his nose to not spill blood everywhere. Harry would have healed him quickly with a simple episki, but he couldn't do magic in front of so many regular humans. Deciding that helping Issei was more important than watching Kiba try to appease his king, he then said to Akino, "I'll be right back, Honorable. I'm going to help Issei with his bloody nose in the men's room." Akino accepted his words and the sweet nickname he gave her with a brilliant smile. She absolutely loved being called such affectionate nicknames like that since her Harry really meant them. With a nod of her head as an answer, she watched her man carefully guide their underclassmen by the forearm towards the closest men's room. She couldn't wait to see what Ria's reaction would be at being ignored so thoroughly. Her king wasn't used to be brushed off like that. The queen of the Gremory peerage wasn't blind. She could see the attraction that the redhead was starting to feel towards her man. Frankly, Akino wasn't opposed at sharing her man, but only with her best friend. She had been curious at what sex with two partners would be like since she had entered puberty and also wished to push further her teenage explorations with Rias. But in this case, she wouldn't help nor hinder Rias in her pursuit of Harry. Buchu would have to work for it this time if she really wanted in. Some true hard work would do her good. And knowing Harry, he would continue to watch and ogle, but wouldn't make a move until the redhead took the first step. He was way too moral to play both fields, so to speak. She would likely have to give her blessing once they would be ready to start a true relationship. Back to Ria's reaction at being brushed off by Harry, Akino was wrong. It wasn't funny. It was hilarious. Ria's face was as red as her hair. She was gnashing her teeth in rage, glaring in the direction Harry and Issei went. All the while her hands curled into fists were shaking, and by the new feeling of danger floating in the air, Akino could tell that her king was doing her level best to not unleash her power of destruction inside the building. Rias was livid. That man had the most singular talent to get under her skin without even trying. She hated being brushed off like that. Knowing that it was best to not make a scene, she gave a hard look to her knight, who had the decency of looking quite sheepish, before she stalked outside with a forceful march. Some fresh air would do her some good and hopefully cool her fraying temper. Once everybody was ready to go back to the hotel, they made their way back in reverse. But at midway from the cinema and hotel, they ran on a problem. It was relatively minor, but it was the sort that couldn't be solved by magic or devil power. The road leading to the magical district was passing near a skate park, and said skate park was the turf of a band of thugs. While Harry was looking somewhat intimidating with his near 2 meters of height, The matter of fact was that Kiba was built for speed and Issei was still getting in shape, so they didn't look threatening enough to make the thugs back off quickly. Now we had for situation a band of 9 teenage thugs ranging from the age of 15 to 19, trying to pick a fight. Now Rias, her peerage and Harry were in somewhat of an impasse. They all had the necessary power to deal with those pests quite easily, but they couldn't do it the easy way since it would put them in conflict with the Japanese Ministry of Magic, and on the wrong side of the International Statute of Secrecy. The last thing the devils needed was to have to deal with overzealous magical law officers, be they wizards, magicians, or magi. The group of thugs now decided to make them known. The leader approached them first, followed by the rest of the group. He had bleached blonde hair in a mohawk and a cheap nose ring. He was wearing a leather jacket of poor quality, and the rest of his attire left much to be desired also. With a thick nasal voice he said, "Wow, look at that, boys. Fresh meat. Hey, shit stains. Piss off, will ya? We will take it from there." Another dumber one said, "Yeah, beat it before you get hurt, shit stains. Go back to your mamas." A third one piped up, "Hey boss, look at those tits and asses. We'll have great fun tonight with those 4 sluts." Collectively, Kiba, Issei, and Harry shivered in fright and backed away very quickly out of what was about to become a veritable carnage zone. Those clowns had done the taboo. They had awakened the 3-headed dragon of righteous feminine fury. Add to that Ria's already frayed temper, it was going to be a veritable massacre. And by the amount of killing intent now floating in the air, the dragon was pissed beyond belief after waking on the wrong side of the bed this evening. Harry Potter was a modern man. He was taught by both his parents to see men and women as equals in all things and to be the more open-minded possible. He knew that the girls hadn't needed protection, except maybe Asia, who was so gentle that she was incapable of harming anyone. But he felt that a beating at his hands or at the hands of his fellow men would have been more merciful for the thug's ego and masculinity. Firstly, he wouldn't have hit them under the belt to incapacitate them. Secondly, Akino was an accomplished sadomasochist. One who knew exactly where to hit to hurt her enemies the most and to still keep them alive after the session. Seeing her break a thug's leg with a smile on her pretty face as retribution for making inappropriate comments on the size of her bust, and then switch targets since Rias needed a bit of help with a bigger one, since the redhead's victim's arm was as thick as her waist, was rather traumatizing. The screams were somewhat amusing though, in a rather schadenfreude way. "No, that doesn't bend that way. Not that way, not that way. Please. Damn it all to hell, girlie. Stay still so I can grab you and then strip you naked." Unfortunately for him, this dead man walking was now Kaniko's prey, and boy was she in a foul mood. Maybe Harry shouldn't have antagonized her so much recently with his trick of getting rid of her human disguise. It was definitely food for thoughts. He was just glad that she wasn't venting her frustrations on him. Aye. She hadn't taken much time to deck the thug across the face with a carefully toned-down sucker punch and a swift kick in the nuts. Harry had to admit that she really knew what she was doing, even as he and his fellow men flinched in sympathy for the thug that was once more hit below the belt. Then her punching bag flew back only 1.5 meters. Wow, she had great control. It was then that an extra stupid one made the grave mistake of trying to fondle Asia after grabbing her, since he had bypassed the 3 others while they were previously occupied. The shy ex-nun and now bishop had wormed her way into the heart of every peerage member. Her sunny disposition and her never-ending enthusiasm and also her klutziness had made her into everyone's little sister, except Issei, since they were dating. He was the pervert, true, but he wasn't into incest. Yes, even he had morals. Not much true, but he had some. So that thug had figuratively signed his own death warrant, since Asia only had to cry for help, and the 3-headed dragon of righteous feminine fury jumped on its new prey with savage glee. After the beating that was delivered to that guy, he would need to be carefully scraped off the sidewalk by the paramedics and rushed to the nearest hospital in an ambulance. As to why 3 teenage girls were able to do all that damage so easily. Even without an evil peace enhancement, a devil had far greater strength than a regular human. After this minor setback, the rest of the trek to their hotel was smooth once the 3-headed dragon of righteous feminine fury was asleep once more after having sated its need for violence. The altercation had also had for benefits to get rid of the added frustrations the girls had accumulated recently. Nice, no? After another fantastic night of passion and a very nice morning romp in the shower and another fulfilling breakfast, the highlight of their long weekend trip, the very event that Harry was really looking forwards to, had finally arrived. The girls would be shopping for new underwear and bathing suits and would do an improvised fashion show for the boys' benefit. Needless to say, even if both Issei and Harry were taken and Kiba was still a bachelor and not at all interested romantically into the girls of the peerage, he wouldn't miss the show for anything in the world. Seriously, what straight guy would refuse to watch hot willing girls parade around in sexy underwear and very revealing swimsuits? It was like window shopping, really. You could look, but you couldn't touch. The first one to come out of the changing room was Asia, whose face was red as a tomato since she was wearing a rather lacy white number with stockings and matching colors sexy panties. She was met by applauses and rather interested gazes ogling her still developing body. She just had enough daring to thrust her modest chest out before turning and running back into the changing room, the male's gazes burning on her moving and shaking posterior. Akino was the next to exit the changing booths while wearing a navy blue baby doll stopping at mid-thigh, enhancing her very curvy body, hinting at everything while showing nothing indecent. Her skin tone and her long black hair were only accenting the baby doll. Flirtatious, she made several poses, much to the enjoyment of the men. After teasing them by playing with a shoulder strap and giving them a hint of the hidden bountiful flesh, she turned back and strutted towards the changing rooms. She got applauses and loud wolf whistles as companions for her trip back. Harry was glad to have cast a spell beforehand on Issei to make sure he would not be plagued with nosebleeds. The boy would have fallen unconscious way too soon and missed a great show. Damn, but his darling was so sexy. He had quite a hard time to not run after her and have his way with her in her changing booth. Heck, even Albion had something to say. I have to admit, your mate is a gorgeous little thing, partner. You have very good taste. Harry thanked him mentally and put back his full attention back on the show. Thanks, Albion. Man, what a woman. Then it was Kaniko's turn to come out. She was trying to stay as emotionless as possible, but it didn't work well since she was visibly blushing. Not as much as Asia, but enough to be quite noticeable. She was now wearing a sheer short pink negligee that was emphasizing her small frame and showcasing everything below her butt and crotch. While she wasn't very much gifted on the chest area, she had great legs, a firm ass, and she was maturing by the day. She twirled on herself, showing the boys what she looked like on all sides. At first, Kaniko would have refused to parade in underwear in front of the boys. But Butchu's argument that said boys needed compensation for having endured a shopping binge of 4 girls with access to a silver credit card, courtesy of the Gremory clan, without complaining even once was quite convincing. And to get some payback on Harry, she had made extra sure to buy in bulk when she could. So she supposed she could show herself a bit. Fair was fair after all. After all, they had promised to not touch, and Akino-senpai had convinced Potter to not bring his camera like he had wanted before. After a 360-degree twirl, the cute first year walked back to the changing rooms with rather immature hooting and wolf whistles following her. She had to admit that it felt nice to be admired a bit. Then Rias came out literally guns blazing while wearing a veritable knockout red lacy and also quite racy number with little black bows on both the cups of the bra and on the front of the panties. The garters around her waist were colored with a deeper red. It went really well with her creamy skin and long red hair. The men were stunned. The bra was holding her perky melons up and only covering enough flesh to not be indecent. The panties were covering everything from the front side, but from the back side, it was a half-tongue. The boys could see that Ria's arse was smashing. Seriously, how come a teenager got a grown woman curves? Her soft smile suddenly turned quite predatory, for in front of her was the tree spectators now totally speechless. Ha! She had broken them. She was proud of her body, and her devil metabolism made sure that no matter how much she ate, as long as she stayed active, she would not get fat. Satisfied with her results, she turned away, and with an extra sway in her hips, she went back to change. Then the boys came out of their catatonic states to wolf whistle, hoot, and applause at repetition. Oh yeah, her job was done here. After a few repeats of different type of underwear, it was time for the bathing suits. from the modest one-piece to the more racy bikinis. Passing from every color possible, the boys had quite a show. In the end, the boys had very visible erections, and while it felt somewhat awkward for them, the girls took it as a sign that they were attractive and were quite pleased. Issei was very thankful that Harry's spell held out long enough, since with the fountain of blood that was usually coming out from his nose in situations like this would have deprived him of a fantastic show. Sadly, their 4 days weekend outing was coming to an end. Everyone was bringing back together their every possession, old and new, that hadn't been shipped ahead to the clubroom, since it would be easier for Harry to shrink everything if they were at all the same place than everywhere all over the rooms. Once everything was shrunk and put away, the group of 7 left the rooms and walked back to the reception. They all handed back their key cards and Harry got back his safety deposit. Half of it he gave back to Rias, who accepted it in a somewhat absent-minded manner. Once the formalities were over, the group left the hotel in direction of the portkey and apparition point. At the place where the wards all over the magical district of Tokyo were open for magical travel, Harry quickly conjured a green hula hoop. Everyone took hold, and once Harry was sure that everything was all right, he voiced his will. Portis. The hula hoop was then illuminated with a supernatural blue light for a few seconds, before the plastic toy became inert once more. Okay everyone, hold on tight now. We're good to go in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 and activate. Everybody felt the jerking similar to a hook behind their navel and was taken into a spinning drive into the ether. After a few minutes, the portkey deposited them as smoothly as possible in the middle of the occult research clubroom. This time, Issei had taken the instructions seriously and was not kissing the floor even if he stumbled a little. Asia, while still the clumsy girl that she was also very lucky most times. She managed to land rather well in a sitting position on the nearest couch. After inquiring about the amount of time that their purchases was going to stay in their shrunken state before the spell waned, thus restoring them to their original state, 2 hours if left unattended, less if you prodded with magic since he didn't put much power in the spell. Everyone left in the direction of their home. Harry and Akino on the former's motorbike, Issei and Asia on their own bicycles, Kiba and Kaneko by magic circle, thus leaving Rias alone in her clubroom. Well, there was always Gasper, but the seal on the door of his room wouldn't open until midnight. The peace was too good to stay. Things started to get hectic when it was not Graphia who came looking for answers about the collapsed wards, but Ria's mother herself. And boy was she mad, even if it was an Arctic cold kind of wrath. Venelana looked very much like her daughter, Rias, only with shorter brown hair and purple eyes, much like the natural-born members of the Bale clan were known to possess. Due to her devil lineage, she appeared around the same age as her daughter despite being over a few hundred years old, due to the fact that her son Circex appeared to be in his early to mid-20s despite being over 100 years old. From the get-go, every member of Ria's peerage was on pins and needles. Venelana was very well known in the underworld as the brunette Madam of Extinction. Like most devils these days, she had well earned her moniker as an ultimate class devil. After sipping some tea, she then asked with a voice that left no trace of argument. Now my children, which one of you will tell me as to why the wards put in place to keep you all safe are now gone? And also why nobody thought to report it? I only found out after one of Circex's employees in his office building in New Lilith reported that there was an infernal racket coming in from his personal office, and the source of it were wards monitors after the said employee had gotten the permission to investigating the source from his supervisor, who then called me. Now you have only 5 minutes to explain yourselves before I drag everyone back to the Gremory Castle in the underworld with me and ground the whole lot of you for the next 50 years. Just as Rias was about to explain, the door of the clubroom opened, and soon they could see Harry enter. The young man had ditched the school uniform like always once the school hours were over. He was now wearing a nondescript navy blue t-shirt under his dragon hide jacket, faded blue jeans and black sneakers. Just as he was about to salute everyone and maybe cast a few prank spells, this week's target was mostly Kiba's hair, since he had gotten bored to play the same trick on Kaneko and he was still researching new pranks for Issei. When he saw the new arrival and then sensed the tense atmosphere, just as he was seating himself on the couch on the left side occupied by the boys, he said casually, "So, what's up? By the look of the newcomer, I'd say she's a rather close relative of Ria's." Is she an older sister or a cousin perhaps? Whoever she is, I can see that the beauty runs in the family since you're both gorgeous. Your parents must have to beat back the tidal wave of suitors with aluminum baseball bats. I was hoping you guys had found a stray devil or 2 or 3 to eliminate though. I'm really itching for a good fight right now. But I guess if you have someone else here for some sort of official meeting, there won't be stray devil hunting this evening, right? Venelana was now rather amused. This boy was totally flippant towards her presence, all the while ignoring the feeling of dread she had carefully instilled into the clubroom. From his energy alone, she could tell he wasn't part of Ria's peerage. She had long since gotten accustomed to their aura signatures. He was observant enough to see that Rias and she were related, but that wasn't that hard. They looked so much alike. It wasn't the first time she was confused as Ria's sister or close cousin rather than her mother. But the more intriguing thing, it was the fact that while his gorgeous green eyes radiated with sheer power, she couldn't feel much of anything out of the ordinary from him. Either he was on a transcendent level of power that she couldn't feel except what he was letting her feel, which was rather ridiculous since she was one of the strongest devils currently alive. Or he had the ability to hide himself effectively from any supernatural beings. This was more probable in view of his apparent age. Deciding to put things right, she then said, "Good evening, young man. I am Venelana Gremory, nee Bale. I am Ria's mother, not her older sister nor her cousin." "Thank you for the compliment though, my boy. It's always nice to hear things like that. Who are you though? You are not part of my daughter's peerage, and I can't sense young Sona's energy on you either, so it's clear you do not belong to her also." Harry blinked. She was Ria's mother? Damn. Now he could see where the younger Gremory got her beauty though. Deciding that answering couldn't hurt, he then said, "My name is Harry Potter. I'm not part of any peerages, but I do have a connection and legitimate reason to be here. I'm not a magician, but since I'm a wizard, I could make a pact with Rias without any problem whatsoever." "So what bring you here tonight, Mrs. Gremory? Has Rias done something wrong? Like not cleaning her room or not doing her own laundry? Or maybe she left the recreation room in a mess?" Harry wasn't much into the titles. Lord, Lady, Duke, etc., so he usually called every stranger older than him Mr. or Mrs. Venelana had to admit feeling very amused by the young man's flippant attitude. The Potter boy was frank, polite but rather blunt. She could tell right away that she didn't scare him a single iota, and he was also likely trying to put the others at ease with his antics. Her daughter's glare at his back for his theories on her supposed misdeeds was rather amusing, but incorrect. As if she would come all the way to the human world to scold her daughter for such mundane things. No, she would have called her by communication seal. Potter, Potter. Where had she heard that name again? Wait, what was it he said he was again? Wizards were rather limited in number this far in the eastern countries. Since the majority of the wizards worshipped Hecatetrivia in a direct or indirect manner, no matter their birth status, they tended to mostly follow the Greek-Roman pantheon with the heart of the Western civilization. So the boy was a member of a rather well-known magical family then. From the remnant of his accent, she could tell he was native from the United Kingdom. This interesting information could surely become useful later on. Deciding to answer again, she then said smoothly, "Well, Mr. Potter, I am pleased to meet you. If you must know, someone or something broke the wards that my son Cerzechus had erected all around Quo Town to keep my darling children, Sona and her peerage, safe. Then they decided to not call home about it. Believe me when I say that I am not pleased. I had to learn about it from one of my son's employees. Since Cerzechus is away for a business trip alongside his wife, and that my husband is rather busy with the clan's tax reports, it came to me to intervene." After hearing what she had to say, Harry scratched his short beard-covered cheek. He was almost due for a shave. Once he was done, he answered, "Well, Mrs. Gremory, I am the one who took down and dismantled completely the wards around the town. I'm currently training as a curse breaker, so it was relatively easy to dismantle them. But before you go all righteous motherly fury on me, let me explain why I took them down in the first place. Your son had somehow managed to mess up in his casting of the wards. In trying and failing to make them powerful enough to forbid any devils not keyed in them to leave, but also permitting everything else to pass through without problem whatsoever, he somehow managed to connect the power source to feed them the power necessary on the local human population's life force. Worse, they were only keeping the peerages penned into the town. Stray devils still appeared around the town every so often, and they didn't hinder in any way the now deceased rogue fallen angels that were involved with the attempt on Asia's life. The local humans were starting to become sterile and their general health had already declined dramatically. It's not all. The ward schemas were built on a model for an ancient magical dungeon. It was made to keep in check beasts like lower dragons and all sort of nasty critters. As it is, it was a miracle from the Allfather himself that they were holding in the first place. As it is, if I had not been quick enough to dismantle them, Rias and Sona would have likely been caught in a jurisdiction pissing contest with the Japanese Ministry of Magic, the local magical government. Please excuse my crude language, missus, but Mr. Lucifer really fucked things up with his good intentions but botched casting. He really should have entrusted the work to an expert on wards rather than do it himself and leave a half-assed work. Venelana was taken off guard, and it wasn't something that happened often. Thinking about it, she remembered feeling as if something was out of place when the wards went up after Ria's last attempt to go visit the country without escort since she was here on business. But while she was no slouch in magic, she wasn't the most gifted in it either. She could detect no lie from the young man, so she was going to take his word for it. The wards Sursech had built were inefficient to this point. If everything the young man said was true, he had corrected a major mistake. Sursech had somewhat let himself go to seed these last 2 decades, too busy leading their race and honing his power of destruction rather than his magic. She could understand, though, there was only 24 hours in a day after all, and outside of his Satan role and duties, Sursech also had to take care of his son and his wife. Things were not always black and white. After pondering for a while, she then said, "Very well, I see your point, Mr. Potter. I can understand the reasons behind your actions, and since you do not belong to my household, I can't discipline you for taking down the wards without explicit permission. But the children, my children, should still have called immediately after the wards were taken down. We trusted them to be responsible, but it seems that our trust was misplaced. My husband or I would have sent someone with the right skill sets to put new ones in place as quickly as possible. They were there for a good reason after all. Rias, Sona and their peerages are strictly forbidden to leave Kuo town for any reasons without an approved escort, except if they are traveling back to the underworld. As it is, I'm seriously considering bringing them back home and ground them anyway. I'm also pretty sure Lady Citri will soon be having a similar conversation with Sona." She finished with a tone used by a person who had experience giving orders and accustomed to be obeyed. Venelana was not acting with malice. To the contrary, she was of the overly protective sort, and it seems that it was the straw that broke the camel back for Rias. With great passion, she got up from her desk and said, "Mother, that's quite enough. Stop treating me like I am still a child. Sursech's Niai is doing it enough for everyone in the family. By underworld law, I am of a legal age since I turned 18 years old months ago. Thus I am old enough to take decisions about my future myself. I have had more than enough of your overbearing attitude concerning myself and my peerage. You still order me and them like we are still little kids. Well, I say no more. If I want to leave Kuo town for a weekend away, I will do so and without calling for permission. If I am to take over the lordship of our house one day, I can't always ask for permission for every little thing. Now, if you are quite done trying to make us feel guilty for not obeying your every whims, you can go back home. And one other thing. If someone adds any more wards that would keep us penned inside the town against our will, I will have them taken down once again." She finished with a determined look. Now the tension that Harry had worked hard to dispel was back, and with a vengeance. Now there were 2 Grimoire females glaring at each other's, having a battle of wills. Harry just had the time to cast a silencing spell on Issei, since he was about to yell, "Cat fight." In any other cases, he would have been right along with him, but right now was not the time. After a few minutes, Venelana surprisingly backed down. With a sigh, the older woman said, "Well, I guess I had to let you grow up someday. Fine, you have won. I will endeavor to keep myself out of your decision-making process. I will still advise you when I feel the need for it, though. You have the best and the worst of both your father and I, that much is true. Don't worry, I will let your father know. I won't be able to change his mind for your contract, though. I hope you realize that, dear." Do try your best to stay out of trouble, and don't forget that you are always welcome to visit." With that, she walked in a regal way toward the magic circle in the middle of the room, and in a flash of magical light, she was gone. All the tension in the air was slowly evaporating, but the silence was still heavy. Harry broke the ice again by saying, "Well, talk about an overprotective mother. So, Rias, I was wondering when we would go to the underworld to shop for custom motorcycle pieces. And about that trip to the familiar forest, do you have news on that front?" The redhead shot a look to the dark-haired young man and shook her head with exasperation. Nothing was fazing that man so far. She then answered, "We can go to the underworld in 2 weeks when it will be our time to go out, since this coming weekend it's Sona and her peerage's turn to have a little holiday. As for a trip to the familiar forest, you will have to wait until the next full moon. The portal to the forest opens only once a month." Harry nodded to that, then watched in silence the rest of the peerage's usual activities. Everyone had requests tonight, even Issei and Asia. After kissing the Red Dragon Emperor, the bishop left via magic circle, and the pawn hopped on his bike towards his client's home. Akino did kiss him before being summoned away for a request, whispering to his ear that she would join him at his flat when she was done, for some cuddling. The last one to go was Kiba, but he was enthusiastic all the same. When Rias and he were alone, a comfortable silence fell on the clubroom. Harry had closed his eyes and was communing with Albion, and Rias was doing some paperwork. After 10 minutes, she then took her courage in both hands and asked, "Harry, can we talk?" The young man answered with humor in his voice, but without opening his eyes. "Well, that's what we're doing right now, no?" She then let out a frustrated sigh. He loved every second of their banter, and she knew it. "No, seriously, I need help. It's somewhat difficult to explain. I don't know where to start." He then answered right back with a smile on his face. "Well, start by the beginning. You know I won't judge." Irritated, she shot back, "Stop being a smart-ass Harry Potter, or I'll tell Sona that it's you who bewitched Issei's perverted friends into breaking into her gym locker to steal her regular clothes when she was in gym class. You know she promised to castrate you if she caught you messing with her again." Harry opened his eyes, and with a sign of surrender, he said, all right. No needs to get your panties in a twist, geez. I'm listening. How can I help you?" She hesitated for a minute before spilling everything. How she was engaged in a marriage contract to Riser Fenix, the third son of the Fenix family, and how she wanted nothing to do with the womanizer who only saw her for her body and as a trophy. How her brother's hands as Mau Lucifer were tied since he couldn't show favoritism, and since the contract had been signed when she was underage, she couldn't break it. Her mother was against it, but her father had put his foot down and signed it, even if that earned him being banished from her mother's bed for a few months. There was one evident loophole, and it would be a rating game, but she had an incomplete peerage and Riser's was complete. While she felt that she had quality over quantity, quantity was an important factor all the same. Add to that his experience into said rating games and her own inexperience, since technically she was too young to participate to an official one. She didn't have much of a chance to get her freedom back. She then asked with a voice full of anguish, "Can you help me?" Harry's first answer was to get up, and with a couple of long strides, he was near the redhead. Quick as lightning, he gathered up in his arms, ignoring her squeak of surprise, and then walked back toward the couch, sitting again, but now with the pretty girl on his lap. Once sitting comfortably, he embraced her, hugging her against his larger frame. Suddenly timid, Rias wasn't sure what to do in that situation, but the hug that followed was quite nice. Then he took the parole. "I see a few solutions for your problem. First of all, accept the contract and marry Riser. Yes, you would prefer die than to become his wife, I know. It's an option, so I had to put it on the table, so to speak. Second, you would have to enter into a marriage before the contract with Riser becomes binding. After all, if you are already married to someone else, you can't be married off to the other party of the contract. It's a little complicated, but here in Japan, the law say that a young man can marry at 18 and a young woman at 16. The law also clearly state that the future newlyweds needs only the permission of one parent if they are underage. Japan's age of majority is 21. So for that plan to work, You would need to have either your mother or your father sign something, then use magic to copy the signature on the authorization. Of course, you need a male volunteer to act as your husband since same-sex marriage is illegal in Japan. Once the heat is over, you can quietly file for a divorce. Of course, since you're a devil, you can't get married in a church, but a civil marriage would works all the same. Paperwork is the same in any community, and to interact with each other successfully, the bureaucracies have to be able to match each other's, so a marriage in the human world would be binding anywhere, even in the underworld. If obtaining a parent's signature is too hard, well, there's always other countries where the legal age is different. You pick one and I can enchant a portkey for any destination easily. Thirdly, my family have access to a rather ancient magical device able to cast spells, able to rewrite reality if you put enough power into it. The device fell out of use when wands and magical circles started permitting faster results. My sisters used it to prank stuffy nobles and troublemakers in Yasaka's court in Kyoto, so they could cast a spell to either break the contract directly or protect you from being roped into one against your will, or one that would boost your charisma, so you can obtain one of your parents' signatures. Fourthly, if you could find Rule Breaker, Princess Medea of Kolchai's dagger, you could use that mystic code to sever the contract. But good luck finding artifacts like that, they are quite coveted by magi. When Harry stopped talking to let her digest everything he told her, she was surprised to the fact that he had found so many ways so easily to help her get out of the contract. She had also never thought to use the bureaucracy as a weapon or relying on the resources of the human world to get her out of her situation. She felt a bit ashamed to not have looked over Japanese laws since she was a Japanophile. She should really look into other stuff than manga, video games, and anime. Then a radiant smile lit up her face. She had solutions. She just had to balance the good and the bad and then to make her choice. Freedom was in sight. With her radiant smile still on her lips, she then said to the young man, "Thank you so much. You do so much for all of us." He then answered with a shrug of his shoulders and a smile. "You're welcome, and we're friends, yes. Friends help each others." He was answered by a still radiant smile and a hug. Things were finally looking up for Ria's Gremory. Rias didn't lost any time into talking to Akino the next day. She had made her choice the very night Harry had given the options he felt were the most feasible with their resources. But before going with her plan, she had to talk with her queen in private. If it was any other girl that wasn't a close friend or part of her peerage, she wouldn't defer so much, but she was not the type of gal to steal a man already taken. So after school, Akino and Rias went on the roof of the school discreetly since it was usually out of bounds for students. Well, it was the plan, until both teenage devils stumbled upon Kates and Muramea from the Kendo Club, French kissing each other's heatedly while moaning erotically, all the while groping the other outside of their clothes. Rias was stunned to the point of inaction, while Akino, more used to things like that what with her relationship with her boyfriend having reached the very physical stage a while ago, managed to shunt her king away from the still obvious couple before they were seen. Once in a deserted classroom far away from the overly amorous couple, Akino had to hide her smirk at seeing how much Rias was flustered. Not long ago, she would have been as flustered as the redhead. How things had changed in so little time. Wishing that her Harry was here, she decided to get on with it so she could move forward with her day and go see him. "Rias, you wish to speak to me in private about something?" Rias Gremory prided herself for her open mind, but she had been totally caught off guard when she saw Muramea and Kates kissing and moaning wantonly all the while groping each other's tits like that. Before her mind could go further down the gutter, Akino's voice took her back to reality. Taking a big breath, she then took her courage with both hands and answered. "I talked with Harry last evening when you were out fulfilling your contracts. I asked for his help and opinion in how I could get out of the marriage contract with Riser Fenix. Your man is quite resourceful, Akino. In about 5 minutes he found 4 viable solutions to help me out. 4. The 2 solutions that would work better would be the use of his family's ancient magical device to cast spells or use the bureaucracy against itself. The thing is, if I really want to escape the marriage contract for good, ironically I would have to be married before said contract become binding. And well gosh, why is it so difficult? I would like your permission to at least pursue the matter of a civil marriage with him until the heat that is sure to be put on us once we act died down." I know you are both in love with each other's, and trust me, the very last thing I want is to come between the both of you. But Harry is the only male that I'm comfortable enough with to ask that from him. Kiba won't consider any sort of romantic relationships until he has had his vengeance. Issei is much too immature, and it would also break poor Asia's heart. Genshiro Saji is out of question for many reasons, no matter if he is Sona's pawn. I would usually never ask that of you, Akino, but I would rather kill myself than be chained for life to that pompous leech. Rias, having ranted the last phrase, was now panting, her eyes wide. She was feeling all sort of conflicting emotions. She was not ready to be married in general, but if she was forced to choose between one man to which she had started to have romantic feelings towards or another that she couldn't even tolerate, the choice was rather obvious. But she refused to make her move without her best friend's accord. She was not the type of gal to steal the man of another woman. Ria's Gremory was not a home wrecker. She was a devil, but she had morals. Akino had the feeling that this was coming. Ria's deadline was approaching fast, and in fact, the deadline would fall on her peerage as a whole as well. As her husband, Riser would have the power to veto who could or couldn't be part of Ria's family. According to the old laws, he could even bed the women of their little family, be they willing or not. Akino would never let another man other than her Harry touch her like that as long as they were together. But was she willing to share her man with another woman? Sincerely, if it was anyone else than Rias making that plea, she would have told them no immediately. But Rias had taken her in while she was a street rat down on her luck and hadn't cared a single iota that she was a half-breed. The Gremory heiress had done so much for her, and well, Akino just couldn't let her suffer. After a loud sigh, she then answered with a serious voice. If it was anybody else making that plea, I would have told them no immediately. I am willing to share him, but only with you. However, before you make your move on him, Rias, you have to understand something very important. Harry is not one of those little boys with little to no maturity like those at school. If you wish to enter in our relationship, you will have to give it a serious try. He doesn't want to fling Rias. If that's what he wanted, he would have taken the offers of the fangirls. Harry's wish is to build himself a future with a loving partner as his equal at his side. If you can't give a true relationship with the both of us a serious try, please don't go through the civil marriage route. You're my best friend in the entire world way before being my king, and I don't want the relationship we have between us turning awkward and deteriorating. Promise to me that you will honestly try to build a romantic relationship with Harry and myself, and then I will give you my blessing. If not, we will have to find another way to get rid of that blasted contract. She finished with an unusual serious look on her pretty face. Rias was slightly taken back by how serious things had gotten so suddenly. But she guessed she could understand her best friend's point of view. It was no longer childish things that they were dealing with, but life-altering decisions and adult matters. While in the eyes of Japan's human government, they were all still underage, in the eyes of the underworld and the magical communities, Harry, Akino, and she were now of age. They couldn't afford to use the "I'm still a child" card any longer. Not if they wished to deal once and for all with what was coming. After her resolve was hardened, she answered, "You have my solemn word, Akino. I will actively try to build a serious relationship with the both of you." Akino fixed her current hardened violet gaze into her king's blue-green eyes to see if she was really sincere, and when she saw what she wanted, the pressure in the air disappeared. Then, with a lascivious smirk on her pouty lips and her teasing voice, she said, "Harry has an unoccupied guest room into his apartment. When we have convinced him to be your husband, you could move right in if you wanted to. It will be homier than a lonely room in the old school building. Also, given that we both have for habit of prancing around naked in the morning or in the late evening, he won't object to rooming with you. You can be assured of that. I mean, what straight guy would object to being able to look at the both of us naked? I'm warning you right away though. We are very active sexually, so you better not barge into his room when I'm staying over without knocking first if you don't want to have a show or if you don't wish to join in on our fun, you fufufu." Ria's face became flushed once again at hearing that. Since she had gotten to know Harry, her late-night exploring of her body when she was alone had featured him more often than not in her fantasies. And now, her best friend was tempting her by revealing outright their nightly activities. Oh, she was going to get her queen back for that. She didn't know how or even when, but payback would be a bitch. After school let out for the day a few hours later, both young women walked briskly towards Harry's apartment. Rias had finally plucked her courage and gone for a visit a few times after their outing to Tokyo. She also found out that Kiba came around often to spar with the black-haired young man. Both girls had very recently found out that Harry possessed for main weapon a silvery white and blue-colored lance commissioned and gifted to him at his 15th birthday by Odin Allfather in person, if he was to be believed. To their great surprise, they had also found out from indisputable sources that the Potter family were the descendants of the Norse trickster god, Loki. You see, Odin's favorite punishment to teach his children some humility and good sense was to cast them out of Asgard in a mortal body with no or very limited powers available to them, depending on how much the chieftain god was pissed at the time. A few centuries ago, Loki was forcefully incarnated in the mortal body of a witch named Iolanthe Peveril. The Peveril family was a rather notorious one in the wizarding community of Britain, what with the legend of the Deathly Hallows. So alright folks, that's all for today. Stay tuned for part 6. Do subscribe, like and share for more such videos. Also check out the story and author Gabriel Herrol on FANFICTIONnet. Press the bell icon to be notified first on release. See you in the next video. Till then, goodbye.